Corey Feldman was quite possibly one of the first and definitely one of the loudest people exposing dark Hollywood and the Epstein Files. But for years he was ignored, and even worse than that, he was looked at as crazy and sick. People basically said he was a has-been that's trying to find his way back into the spotlight. But with everything that we know today regarding the Epstein Files and dirty Hollywood, it's actually looking like he's been telling the truth all along. Today we're going to explore all of the instances where he exposed these crimes that were happening to young actors, actresses, talent, artists of all types. And for years it has gone absolutely ignored. I appreciate you guys subscribing to the channel. Now let's dive into the truth.
Tell you that the #1 problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be pedophilia.
Before we get into what Jeffrey Epstein's inner circle was allegedly consuming, before we get into the code word emails the chef from a restaurant literally called the cannibal, the 330 gallons of sulfuric acid ordered the day after his indictment, you need to understand that one man has been screaming about this network for over 30 years.
Yeah, I was surrounded by them. They were everywhere like vultures.
And every single time he opened his mouth, they called him unstable. They called him a has-been. They called him a liar.
It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just out, that arm will grow back. You have to take that.
8 arms, 1 head. And what that head was allegedly doing on a private island in the Caribbean, documented in federal emails, confirmed by DOJ releases, described in handwritten journal entries from victims, is something that should make every person watching this stop and ask one question. Why did it take this long for anyone to listen? Let's go back to the beginning. Not 2020, not 2015, all the way back to the 1980s. Corey Feldman was a child star at the absolute peak of Hollywood's golden era. The Goonies, Stand By Me, The Lost Boys, Gremlins. If you grew up in that decade, his face was everywhere. He was the kid who represented something pure. Childhood on screen, innocence bottled up and sold to millions of families who had absolutely no idea what was happening to him.
These are movies that I watched throughout my childhood, that I recently have had my children watch because they had such sentimental value to me and how I grew up. To think that the actors and actresses that were in these movies throughout my childhood were dealing with all of these terrible things because of all of these, well, let's just say awful people in Hollywood, it's extremely disturbing, and it's so sad to hear and to see and to know that they had to deal with all of that, and now as adults have to deal with all of that weight on their shoulders because, man, some terrible things happened. And inside of this video, you're gonna see things from Corey Feldman that you have probably never seen before.
The moment those cameras stopped rolling.
There was a circle of older men, and they all had either their own power or connections to great power that surrounded themselves around this group of kids.
Connections to great power. Let that phrase sit for a second, because Feldman isn't describing a few isolated predators. He's describing a system, an organized, protected, self-sustaining network where access to children was treated like a commodity, and the people providing that access were rewarded with career advancement, industry protection, and silence from every institution that should have stopped it. For years, Feldman tried to get anyone in the media to take this seriously. He went on talk shows, he gave interviews, he begged journalists to follow the thread, and every single time, the machine closed around him.
Thousands of people in Hollywood who have this same information. Why me? Why is it if I don't release the names in the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm the bad guy? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
Think about what that actually means. Thousands of people, not dozens, thousands. People who witnessed the same things, heard the same stories, were present in the same rooms, and every single one of them stayed quiet. That's not coincidence. That's not fear of social awkwardness. That's a controlled system of silence built by people with enough power to end careers, end reputations, and according to multiple sources, end lives. Feldman eventually did something that almost nobody in Hollywood has ever done. He spent $1.3 million of his own money he didn't have to spare, to make a documentary called My Truth, The Rape of Two Coreys.
Now, a few things were mentioned here that are worth talking about. One of those is traditional media. Why are they not covering this? And the reason is very simple. Traditional media is the reason for a lot of this. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in traditional media is a evil person, but many people in traditional media do know about what's going on and have known about what's going on for decades. And it's something that if it's exposed on traditional media, it puts a lot of people in that space into hot water. Thank God for YouTube and other platforms like this, where people that are outside of that circle, like myself, are able to bring these types of things to the light. And one other thing that Corey said was, how come he is the one sharing everything when everyone knew what was going on? And I think that's one of the biggest questions that we have here, and that we've had throughout the entire release of the Epstein Files and this discussion about what's going on with Diddy and Hollywood. This was no secret. This was no just one person taking advantage of children. No, this was an entire network of people. And as he mentioned, you were put forward, moved up in rank throughout the system if you were engaging in these terrible things, which means the worst people over time have become the strongest people.
In that film, he named names: Marty Weiss, John Grissom, Alfie Hoffman, Dominic Bragia, Charlie Sheen. But here's what Feldman himself has said repeatedly since that documentary dropped. Those names were just one arm. Jim Caviezel, the actor who gave up his entire mainstream career to spotlight child trafficking, has been describing the same architecture Feldman identified, but from a different angle, a wider angle.
It's an 8-armed octopus. And if you take just out, that arm will grow back.
What he's saying right there, because it keeps on cutting out, is it's an 8-arm octopus. You take off one of the arms, it will grow back, and it doesn't kill the system. That you have to take the head, because then it'll kill everything, which means what he's trying to say is you need to go from the top of this entire network and eliminate all of the top of the network, and then everything below will stop. You can't just start nicking away at the things on the bottom and hoping that things end, because it won't, and that's been proven.
8 arms. What Feldman was exposing was the Hollywood arm, the one that preyed on child actors, that used the casting process as a hunting mechanism, that protected its members through industry loyalty and financial leverage. But Caviezel's point is that this arm doesn't operate alone. It connects to a political arm, a financial arm, a media arm, and according to documents now in federal hands, an island arm, Little St. James, Jeffrey Epstein's private island in the U.S. Virgin Islands, the place that, according to satellite imagery, DOJ released photographs and multiple survivor testimonies, was engineered from the ground up to make escape impossible. Passports confiscated, flight crews paid off, staff at the airport bribed to look the other way. This wasn't a party destination. This was a controlled environment, and what was happening inside that environment goes significantly deeper than what most people are willing to discuss.
I mean, just let's go back and let's just look at that picture for a moment. Right here, first of all, what are they looking at? We don't know, but you got Ghislaine Maxwell, Donald Trump, Jeffrey Epstein, and other elites, as they are called, that are, and he said here that this wasn't for entertainment, but you know what? They had their own strange, warped type of entertainment, and I think that a lot of the things that went on the island actually were to please that entertainment.
Most people are willing to discuss. When the Epstein documents were unsealed, the world expected a handful of famous names attached to a sex trafficking operation. What they got was something that forced even the most skeptical observers to reconsider what they thought they understood about how power actually works in this country. Here's where it gets disturbing in a very specific, documented way. Analysts who reviewed hundreds of thousands of emails released by the Department of Justice discovered something that went far beyond the trafficking allegations. Epstein and his associates were communicating using a system of food-based code words, and the context in which those words were being used makes no rational sense if you take them literally. Beef jerky, white tuna, pizza, grape soda. On the surface, those are grocery items. In the context of these emails, you are paired with the other details surrounding them, the quantities being discussed, the way they're being stored, refrigerated, transported. They read as something else entirely. That's not a dinner invitation.
There were emails from people, redacted names again, saying, hey, I have 68 pounds of jerky in my freezer. I'm not sure what to do with it. There were emails of, I need more jerky. I'm going to send it to the lab.
68 pounds sent to a lab. The names attached to those emails, redacted. Every single one. And then there's the chef, Francis Darby, the man whose name appears in emails with Epstein discussing recipes, quantities, preparation methods, and storage instructions for items being prepared on Little St. James Island.
The chef that was making the jerky, that was sending recipes, that was on the island, was Francis Darby.
Why don't we get to hear from these people? Why can't we go talk to Francis Derby right now and actually see what those recipes were.
Who's that? Francis Derby owns the restaurant Cannibal.
There is a 2012 email from Jeffrey Epstein to Chef Francis Derby, documented, inquiring about the handling of frozen white tuna and the preparation of specific recipes to be carried out on the island. Derby, at that time, owned and operated a meat-focused restaurant in New York and Los Angeles called, without any irony, the Cannibal. Now, that restaurant served conventional food. It was a real business. Nobody is claiming it literally served what the name implies. But when the owner of an establishment called The Cannibal is exchanging coded food preparation emails with Jeffrey Epstein about island recipes, storing items by the pound, and sending batches to labs, the name stops feeling like clever branding. And here's the email that investigators keep coming back to.
I'll tell you, any business, any person that you would think, like, for example, the name of his restaurant right now, it seems like something fun. It's a cool restaurant, it's trendy, and it has that strange name. If it wasn't related in any way to Epstein, okay, fine. Like, that's just someone living on the edge with their business idea. But as soon as you tie in either Hollywood or Jeffrey Epstein, it instantly becomes something much more serious and something that we need to really consider as not as fun and trendy as we initially thought.
Subject line, jerky recipe, dated December 21st, 2012.
Hi, Steve Hansen, no relation. On
Thank God.
Jeffrey's Island is requesting the latest beef jerky recipe as He has asked her to try and make some. He says the last batch that you made tasted different.
The response references the old way Francis was doing it and confirms that someone on Little St. James Island was going to attempt the preparation themselves. They're not talking about actual beef jerky. Everyone who has reviewed these emails at length, investigators, journalists, commentators, has reached the same conclusion. The language, the quantities, the logistics, the lab references, none of it maps onto snack food production. So the question becomes, what were they actually preparing and who was consuming it? To understand that question, you have to understand something about the culture at the very top of the Hollywood and billionaire elite ecosystem, something that Corey Feldman has been gesturing at for years without always having the language to articulate it precisely. There is an obsession, documented, on record, discussed openly on mainstream television, with youth, with the biological properties of youth, with finding ways to absorb, transfer, or retain the vitality associated with being young. And that obsession exists on a spectrum. On the publicly visible end of that spectrum, things that sound strange but are legal.
This is made from growth hormones of human.
Look, the wrinkles has just disappeared.
That happened on daytime television. A guest applying a skincare product derived from human foreskin tissue, and the product being endorsed and promoted to millions of viewers as an anti-aging breakthrough.
I'm sorry, Steve.
You'd have sat up here and squirted somebody's private parts in my damn hair.
The audience laughed. The host was horrified in a comedic way, and the product kept selling. That's the public-facing version of something that gets significantly darker the further up the wealth and power ladder you climb. The mainstream medical community, not fringe researchers, mainstream institutions, has been openly exploring compounds derived from young blood, plasma transfusion trials, stem cell anti-aging protocols, clinical studies on whether biological material from younger donors can meaningfully reverse aging markers in older recipients. That science is real. It's being funded. It's being studied. What witnesses and investigators describe in the context of Epstein's Island network is the version of that science that operates without ethics boards, without consent protocols, without any institutional oversight whatsoever.
I have a question for you. Many of you that watch are adults, have families, have children. How many of you, when you had your child, because I have two of my own, were you asked if you wanted to have the umbilical cord of your child saved, stored, preserved for X number of years? God forbid something were to happen to your child and they would need those stem cells. The funny thing is about that, many parents are like, yes, let's do that because it's the ability to save my child. God forbid something terrible happens. But after a certain number of years, it's no longer stored. What happens to it then? I have a very hard time believing that it's just thrown in the dumpster and discarded. Someone is getting it and it's being used somewhere. And that was something that was potentially from our children.
She believed consumption was transformation, that youth could be taken in, that vitality could be absorbed. She talked about ancient rites, about elites throughout history who understood what the masses didn't.
ancient rites, elites throughout history. The claim isn't that this mindset is new. The claim, supported by historical record going back centuries, is that certain circles of extreme wealth have always believed they were entitled to access things that ordinary people couldn't have. And that belief, when it exists in an environment with zero accountability, no law enforcement, and an island specifically designed to prevent escape, produces outcomes that are genuinely difficult to process. But it goes further than treatments and compounds, much further. Among the thousands of documents released by the DOJ, there are journal entries, handwritten entries from a victim, describing experiences on Epstein's properties with a level of specific, personal detail that investigators have described as highly credible, specifically because of how precisely they align with known facts about Epstein's inner circle.
By the way, I just put out a video yesterday diving into those journal entries. It's actually from an Epstein victim talking about the things that happened to her on the island. It is very in-depth and very graphic. If you're interested in that, go check out one of my previous videos. You could find them on the main page of the channel if you like.
Close your eyes, close your eyes, close your eyes. Don't speak, she doesn't talk. I can't stop shaking and it's been a week. A decision was made, but I can't tell Jeffrey.
The entry goes on to describe a medical procedure, a doctor, a clinical environment, pain, and then a tiny head, a tiny arm, a tiny foot, and then silence.
Chillingly, there is even a picture of a sonogram on a page with the words, "She is gone and she won't be coming back."
Investigators have described what these journals point toward as a deliberate operation. Victims being used as surrogates, pregnancies being managed on the island, the resulting infants never accounted for in any official record. What happened to those infants has not been officially confirmed. But given everything else documented in these files, the sulfuric acid, the buried bodies being investigated at Zorro Ranch, the code word emails referencing quantities and labs, the picture that emerges is one that should disturb every person watching this video. 7,000 acres in New Mexico, currently being excavated. Multiple victims coming forward describing being drugged, waking up in what appeared to be medical settings with no memory of how they got there, and reporting signs consistent with organ harvesting.
He ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid.
Now, people have said, I've had these comments come through in the comments section in previous videos, again, because I always do look at your comments. And there are some people that say, oh, he ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid for his pool maintenance. Now, I understand sulfuric acid. I also have a pool. And sulfuric acid is not something that you utilize inside of a pool. And if someone does have some strange way of managing their pool chemical compound, it would be an extremely small amount of sulfuric acid needed for the filtration system. But this acid breaks down everything. If you throw something in sulfuric acid, it will no longer be there, including metals, bones, whatever you throw inside. So 330 gallons is not a normal shipment that he would be getting. And the timing of everything just seems strange.
He ordered 6 55-gallon drums of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island.
The day after his indictment in 2018, Jeffrey Epstein ordered 330 gallons of sulfuric acid to be delivered to the island, 6 55-gallon drums. The first instinct of investigators and commentators who reviewed that order was the same. You don't order 330 gallons of industrial acid to maintain a desalination plant. And here's where Corey Feldman's warning becomes the through line that connects every single piece of this. Because Feldman wasn't just exposing what happened to him. He was warning about a system that operates through silence, enforced silence, purchased silence, and in some documented cases, permanent silence.
Till one betrays a circle that can
That's the architecture. You don't just attend, you participate. And once you've participated, your continued silence is guaranteed. Not by loyalty, but by mutual implication. Everyone in the room carries the same weight. Everyone in the room has the same reason to protect the secret. This is what Jim Caviezel experienced firsthand when Sound of Freedom, a film about child rescue operations, not about any specific celebrity, was essentially blacklisted before release.
Everyone was told, from Rupert Murdoch, from Fox, to every studio, look, if you touch this thing, you will be out, you will be done. You'll be finished in 3 years.
Every major studio, every major network, not asked, told. To stay away from a film about saving children. Think about what that requires. Think about how many people at how many levels of decision making had to receive and comply with that instruction for it to work as completely as it did. That's not one bad actor. That's not one executive with a personal agenda. That's a coordinated, industry-wide response to a single film about child trafficking. And when Feldman tried to premiere his own documentary in March 2020, the streaming website crashed 15 minutes into the event. Audience members reported watching the site appear to be disrupted in real time. Whether it was a coordinated attack or simply traffic overload, nobody has ever produced a satisfying answer. What everyone agrees on is that the timing was extraordinary.
I'm the bad guy. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
This is a man who has spent 30 years, millions of dollars of his own money, and an enormous amount of personal safety trying to get the world to hear something it wasn't ready to hear.
And the thing is, he wasn't trying to just tell his story. He was trying to tell the entire story of elite Hollywood. What goes on, not just to him, but to many actors and actresses, often very young, throughout the industry. He wasn't just trying to save himself. He was trying to take that octopus by the head. And again, the system turned him into a nut job so that everyone that hears this looks at him and says, oh, another crazy person from Hollywood. I hate how Hollywood stars, they just all go nuts. It's because whenever they start to speak out, they're looked at as if they're insane, because that is the whole story that's written around speaking out.
Every time he spoke, the machine responded. Here's what's happening right now that changes the calculus. The names Feldman exposed in his 2020 documentary, Marty Weiss, John Grissom, those names didn't stay in his story. They started appearing in completely unrelated investigations. Weiss appeared again in the Quiet on Set documentary about Nickelodeon. The same network of men Feldman described in the context of his own abuse showed up in the documented abuse of an entirely different generation of child actors. Drake Bell, the Nickelodeon generation, the 1980s generation, different victims, different contexts, different decades, same network.
This week, new accusations coming to light against Cuba Gooding Jr. The allegations come from a former producer for Combs, Rodney Jones. Now, it originally just listed Diddy as far as fault in, but now Gooding is listed as a co-defendant, accusing him of fault as well. According to court filings, the alleged happened on a yacht rented by Combs that went to the U.S. Virgin Islands last January.
The U.S. Virgin Islands, Epstein's territory, now appearing in allegations connected to completely separate celebrity cases with overlapping geography, overlapping methods, overlapping silence. Every time you pull on one thread, as Feldman has said repeatedly, 5 more connections surface. So where does this leave us? Corey Feldman spent $1.3 million to tell the world what he knew in 2020. And according to people who have remained close to him through everything that followed, that documentary was not the full story. It wasn't even close to the full story. It was the version of the story he could prove at that point in time. The information he's been gathering since, the testimonies, the documented connections between the Hollywood network he exposed, and the larger operation that Epstein was running. That information is still being compiled. According to sources familiar with his ongoing work, what he is now makes what he released in 2020 look like Chapter 1.
I believe it's going to move a lot of whistleblowers to come forward, but not one. In the hundreds, maybe thousands of them worldwide start coming forward.
And the crazy thing is, this story gets bigger every single day. Whether there are people that are no longer interested because as Americans, we get disinterested in things so quickly. But this is a topic that we need to keep fresh on our minds and keep making noise about. But unfortunately, many people do forget. It falls out of the trend, but every day more information is dropping surrounding the Epstein files, information even beyond what Corey Feldman has been telling us for so many years.
And the conditions for that are shifting in real time. The Diddy investigation has forced mainstream audiences to confront the fact that private parties hosted by powerful celebrities, attended by industry gatekeepers, can involve organized at a scale most people refused to believe was possible. The Quiet on Set documentary forced a reckoning with what Nickelodeon was doing to children for decades and confirmed names that Feldman had been repeating into the void for years. The Epstein documents continue to be unsealed. Every release produces new names, new connections, new questions. The excavation of Zorro Ranch in New Mexico is ongoing.
I know that the saints in heaven wish to be on this earth right now because there are far more people on this earth than there's ever been. And there are far more souls to save right now than there ever has been.
Whether or not you share the spiritual framework behind those words, the facts underneath them are documented. The files are real, the code word emails are real, the sulfuric acid order is real, the journal entries are real, the excavation is real, the survivor testimonies are real. That's not a rumor. That's documented data from federal agencies. 300,000 children. And every flight log, every guest list, every redacted name And those DOJ email releases is a potential piece of the answer to where those children went and what happened to them. Here's the thing about Corey Feldman that doesn't get said enough. He was right about Weinstein before Weinstein went down. He was right about the Nickelodeon network before Quiet on Set confirmed it. He was right about the culture of protection and silence before the Diddy case made it impossible to deny. He has been right publicly on the record at enormous personal cost every single time.
Thousands of people in Hollywood who have this same information. Why me? Why is it if I don't release the names in the next 2 months, 6 months, or a year, I'm the bad guy? I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been abused. I'm the one who's trying to come forward and do something about it.
The question isn't whether Corey Feldman's warnings were valid. The question is how much longer the system that buried those warnings can hold. Because the beef jerky emails are in federal records. The chef from The Cannibal is in federal records. The sulfuric acid order is in federal records. The journal entries are in federal records. The bodies being searched for at Zorro Ranch are a live, ongoing investigation. And Corey Feldman, the kid they called crazy, the has-been they laughed off talk show stages, the victim they tried to silence with money and media and industry loyalty, he's still here, still documenting, still building the case, still keeping the promise he made to his best friend.
I think it's time that we as a society start looking at these people coming forward and actually listening to what they're saying and stop listening to media saying that they're crazy for opening up about things that are not really going on in Hollywood, because I think at this point in time, we all know that most of the people coming forward are actually telling the truth. Check out the full video on the Shocked YouTube channel, and if you want to hear more about this story and how Mel Gibson exposed Hollywood, I have full details of that inside of this video. Go check it out, and I'll see you over there.